I want to first start by saying how deeply honored and humbled I am to have the chance to speak with you all today on this tremendous and joyous occasion of your commencement. Like you, I'm surrounded today by those who have come before me, those who have supported me, and those who are with me in my life today. My parents, Mike and Norma, my Aunt Sandy, a Linfield alum herself, my wonderful husband Joe, and my amazing children, Anna and Joey, and my closest friends, Theresa, Danny, Troy, Vicky, all Linfield alums, and all as close as we became in those first years, venturing out beyond the not so aptly named Failing Hall. Let us all take a moment to thank those who've been with us along the way and have joined you here today to celebrate. Thank you, all of you. Now, as I reflected on the message that I wanted to impart to today's graduating class, I knew that platitudes were not needed. These are not easy times. Graduating seniors have to find their footing in an economy still in slow recovery. Our country faces multiple threats, both here and abroad. Just over 1 month ago, the town I now call home, Boston, suffered a terror attack, the largest on U.S. soil since 9/11. This is the real world that we all talk about. However, there is so much more to celebrate, and the promise that lies before all of you is tremendous. We also live in times of increasing tolerance for diversity of many kinds. Important strides have been made forward in global health and governance, and a period of tremendous change in technology and how we communicate and connect to one another is underfoot. Our own Pacific Northwest is a leader in this technological revolution. We have much to be proud of. This is an exciting time to enter the real world. Now, my own journey into this so-called real world began just where you are 22 years ago, so I guess that puts me in the more refined category. My memory of that launch, so layered with emotion, remains exceedingly clear today. It was 1991. REM's Losing My Religion was topping the charts. Acid wash jeans and permed hair were in. We had hair up to here. We were young. We had our whole lives before us. We were having an existential crisis. My dear friend, Tammy Tyler, and I were sitting just blocks from here at Jake's Deli. Tammy was well known and loved at Linfield, both for her tremendous talents in theater and also for her booming laugh and the ability to hit all the low notes in the Alpha Phi Edelweiss song. It was a sunny day just before graduation, and we were fretting about where life would take us next. Had we made the right choices? She was off to the Peace Corps in Bolivia. I was off to graduate school to deepen my training in counseling work for kids affected by violence. Things felt so unsure. It was really hard to imagine where our lives would take us next. I remember fondly how our beloved and implausibly boyish professor of sociology, Tom Love, and you know what I mean, had asked sheepishly, "I have just one question for you. Did we coddle you at Linfield? Did we do enough to help you prepare for the real world?" Well, graduates, what I realized then and what I believe today remains true. Here at Linfield, you have built an excellent foundation. The rest of it, the next steps, it's up to you. However, I want you also to know that the journey will not be a solo one. Along the way, as you've heard from so many, the people around you today are going to be some of the most important people in your lives going forward, and I mean that. There will be highs and lows, but if you keep your eye on the prize, you will prevail. For this reason, I wanted to talk about the idea of personal determination and will and resilience. These are topics that concern me and the work that I do today. It also relates back to my own personal history. So I grew up in Alaska, in what's called the Alaskan Bush. My hometown of Bethel, population 3,000, was the hub for a network of native Alaskan villages in the area. It's in the interior, so it's a land of tundra and lakes with hardly a mountain or tree in sight. It was there that I first learned so potently about the intersection between individual will and community collective effort. Growing up in Bethel, I thought it was a wonderful place. I spent countless hours outside, playing in deep snow in the winters and the gooey mud of spring when the river ice would begin to ping and crack at what they called breakup. Half the town would flood. Even our school was on stilts. In Bethel, I first learned about the importance of public health and social justice. My father, who's here today, taught math and science and was also the fire chief. My mother worked for the region's social services department and was director of the town's only daycare center in those years. They later named it for her. She later started the first infant learning program in the region, connecting families and children from remote villages to care in Anchorage for everything from fetal alcohol syndrome to failure to thrive. It was a wild place to grow up, too. One year, Bethel topped U.S. per capita homicide rates due to a toxic mix of alcohol, guns, and family violence brought on by disempowerment of the local Native peoples by outsiders and the many vices outsiders had brought. However, despite tremendous hardship, people in Bethel looked out for each other with a sense of collective effort I think too often gets lost in our day-to-day busy lives. But I know that you've had it here at Linfield. Now back in Bethel, I can even recall the year the town's power generator caught on fire, leaving many families without heat and sub-zero temperatures. But the town rallied. Those with wood-burning stoves took in neighbors. Everyone made it through. You too, my friends, will make it through. Today, as a Harvard professor, when people ask me about my work in Africa, I often point out that most low-resource settings I work in, with their lack of paved roads, no plumbing or piped water, the stray and often rabid dogs, all remind me of home in some way. Alaska was unfortunately just the colder version. Today, I'm engaged in two major projects in Africa. The first is grounded in this quest to understand more about resilience. That idea that despite very daunting life adversities, some people, in fact many people, manage to do okay, to achieve a level of competency and success in life despite all the challenges that they've come through. I wanted to understand what stones pave the pathway to resilience. The first of my major studies, as you heard, began in Sierra Leone, West Africa. Now, how did I get there? After Linfield, I'd gotten a master's focused on counseling and the use of expressive arts and working with children from a range of backgrounds and cultures. But even that degree, as passionate as I was about it, was a big leap. People told me it sounded nice, but I would never put bread on the table doing such things. After a few years of working in Portland for a community mental health agency, I became convinced that I wanted to do more than apply Band-Aids to the lives of kids, too often abused and neglected by the very system set up to care for them. Now, this was really a crazy idea, as I had a decent job, a steady salary, and even a fabulous apartment in the Hawthorne district. But I knew I wasn't there yet. There was more out there. So this was the second big leap. I was offered the chance to volunteer at the United Nations in New York to help out with an event called the Day of the World's Indigenous Peoples. My contacts at the UN had roots in my hometown in Alaska. I decided to go for it. I took leave from my work in Portland to volunteer in the office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Before I knew it, I was likely the first art therapist dashing about the halls of the UN, covering meetings on refugee crises and treaty discussions. Now, this may sound glamorous, but pulling this off with no salary and no savings was not pretty. I house sat all over New York City. To make ends meet, for example, I house sat for a journalist couple who lived above the Ethiopian restaurant that they owned in Soho. Now, they had a rabbit that they viewed as the earthly reincarnation of a great spiritual teacher, Lablani. The rabbit, being spiritual and very important in their lives, required essential oils added to his daily drinking water. This was my job, and a very strange way to kick off a new life in New York. I then moved to the West Village, where the animal theme continued. For 2 months of free housing, I took care of a cat who vacillated unpredictably between cute and cuddly and a vicious arm-shredding attack animal. I used to throw a cat toy out of the bedroom each night and slam the door behind Fang, as she was called, as not to be made into mincemeat in my sleep. My last apartment, where my assignment was to water the geraniums, was a penthouse in Chelsea, next to that of Annie Leibovitz and Debbie Harry. I would see them in the elevator. Despite not having a penny to my name, I managed to keep myself afloat at the UN, a girl from the Alaskan villages, living in New York City for 8 months with no salary. You too will do crazy and courageous things to make it, but you will make it. The message here is that playing it safe won't get you where you want to go. Sometimes you too may have to take a leap of faith. Another of the truths about personal agency and resilience is that as lonely and as existential as it all sounds, and it is also a collective journey. There is tremendous interwovenness. We all play a part in the success and happiness of others. There were times earlier in my own journey where I couch surfed in Seattle and Portland while scouring the paper for jobs. Several times, all of my worldly belongings were hosted in the garages of friends. I actually still have about 8 of my paintings locked somewhere in a Willamette Valley winery shed, which have yet to be found. If you have any leads on this, let me know. There will be times when you are needy and times when you are needed. Be ready for one another. This gets back to my research on resilience. In 1998, after my UN experience and several stints of work in community and family services in Portland, I was admitted to graduate study at the Harvard School of Public Health. I picked up where I had left off in academia, with a focus in my research on children and violence. First in inner-city Chicago, then returning to themes I had pursued here at Linfield in working with the Upward Bound program, mental health and promoting resilience in refugee children. In 2002, I started a study to investigate risk and resilience in the mental health and social reintegration of war-affected youth. Sierra Leone had just come to the end of a brutal 11-year civil war that involved the massive abduction of children as child soldiers. If you've seen the movie Blood Diamond, you've seen the Hollywood portrayal of Sierra Leone's tragedy. As these youth returned to their communities, there was a need to understand what made a difference for how they fared over time. What mattered for those who did better or did worse? To do this, we began to track and interview a cohort of over 500 war-affected youth, about a third of them girls, and most of them former child soldiers, from the time that they were ages 10 to 17 and now into young adulthood, and this study continues to this day. There are lessons to be learned in this work that are relevant to all of us today. Overall, our study underscores how the long-term psychosocial adjustment and social reintegration of young people who've been through some of the worst trauma imaginable is shaped by both individual factors, age, gender, violence exposures, but also by many societal factors in the post-conflict environment. Imagine a drop of water into a still pool and the concentric circles shimmering around it. That is the image of resilience that I like to paint. Yes, it matters what you bring to the table in terms of your individual skills, your sense of will and determination, but what really starts to matter as well is how those individual factors interact across many layers of life, from family to peers and to the larger society. We all have a role to play in this. We all play a part in the success and the happiness of others. In my cohort of war-affected youth, we see the full bell curve of outcomes, the full normal statistical distribution. From a young man now in prison for murder after he killed his girlfriend in a fit of rage, to a young woman just about to finish medical school. And when you begin to unpack their stories, this pattern pervades. It's about personal agency and determination, but also the little gestures, the small opportunities, and the leaps of faith along the way. In speaking with the former child soldier, who is about to become one of the few female doctors in her country, I'm struck by her emphasis on how, despite the terror she witnessed and was subjected to, what kept her on track was a sister who had been abducted along with her. And when she returned home to learn that her parents had died during the war, staff from local organizations had rallied and helped her to collect money to pay for the school fees that would otherwise have been out of her reach. Today, it's her dream to become a doctor in order to give back what has been given to her to help those who are sick and suffering in order to make her own difference in this world. I urge you to think too about how you can give back. And every one of you here today, you know you've been helped along the way too. Perhaps by a Linfield scholarship like me, or by a dedicated family also like me, or by tremendous and supportive professors like all of us here at Linfield. Sometimes giving back is a gesture as small as helping a neighbor or becoming a mentor to someone in your field, be it business, mass communications, or biology. Never forget about giving back. It will yield endless returns. The great physician and social justice leader, Dr. Albert Schweitzer, was quoted as saying, "In everyone's life, at some time, our inner fire goes out." Linfield, your inner fire will flicker and wane, but as Schweitzer reminded us, that inner spark is then burst into flame by an encounter with another human being. We should all be thankful for those people who rekindle the inner spirit. Even as I stand here today, it's hard to fathom that just months after my wedding in 2001, my friend Tammy I was speaking about earlier would die of brain cancer, leaving behind her husband and an 18-month-old daughter. But I will tell you, Tammy lived her life to the fullest, and she gave her family every ounce of her joy and her deep and resounding love. We never know where life will take us at any moment. Approach it with an open heart. When we think about personal agency and will, it's really about being open to possibility, striving for something bigger, that ability to dream, to steer yourselves towards something that you believe in, to take those leaps, even though the path along the way feels murky. This is a critical gift that we are all capable of. Another project that I started more recently in 2007 illustrates this well. It has involved developing a parenting intervention for children and families affected by HIV and AIDS. We are looking for ways to support the reimagining of the experience of HIV. Now, when AIDS first tore across sub-Saharan Africa, it was a death sentence. A lot of programs focused on helping caregivers prepare themselves and their children for their own untimely death. But now, through amazing global health leadership to expand access to antiretroviral therapy, HIV today in many places is a chronic condition. We've seen this in our lifetime, much like other chronic conditions such as diabetes or high blood pressure. People can live positively despite HIV. Their children, their families can succeed in life, in school, and as contributors to society. Again, these notions of the ecology, the many interrelated layers of life, that shimmering pool of interconnectedness that contributes to resilience and interacts with individual will and grit and determination is on full display in my work with these amazing families. I was most touched recently by the story of a family that I had the pleasure to meet. A young mother and her 3 children, all living in tremendous poverty, and no one able to talk about the mother's HIV. The 2 younger children, a boy 9 and a girl age 12, lived in fear. They were certain that their mother might die. They had heard the neighbors talking about HIV, talking about them. They had been teased at school. The older brother had a hearing disability, and despite being an enormously bright boy, he'd not been able to attend school. It couldn't accommodate his needs. He was older and stronger and was needed to help his mother farm. However, as our local staff began to work with this family, and as they became more able to communicate, to express their hopes and dreams and ambitions as a family, and to learn about the realities of living well despite HIV, there was a noticeable shift. In discussions with the older children and the young, it became clear that everyone in the family was willing to pull their weight in order to ensure that the oldest son could attend school. His mother had been teaching him on her own, and with some additional help, she was able to connect him with a school that specialized in educating children with disabilities. This young man, I am proud to say, is now at the top of his class. When I last saw him, he showed me his report card, and it would have made any Linfield admissions officer take notice. He had held on to the dream to finish school one day, nurturing it silently through years of solo study as he watched the other kids in his village go to school. But when his opportunity came, He took the leap. He put everything he had into it. This story is about that powerful combination of personal determination, courage, and grit, combined with the compassion and the dedication of others around us. As you embark on this next step along life's journey, it is important to know that you have in you exactly what you need. You have built an incredible foundation here at Linfield. You have the tools. It's now time to step up to that plate. The journey will look different for each of you, from the accounting and chemistry majors to those of us who studied psychology, education, or nursing. But that is what a liberal arts education is all about. You can think deeply, richly, understand the world in a greater complexity and with humility. You recognize that getting ahead doesn't mean just stepping in front of others, but that there is a mutuality in all that we do. We all will have our moments to be helped by others and our moments to be the helper. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Faith is taking the first step, even when you can't see the whole staircase." Have faith, my friends. You are ready. Remember to enjoy the journey, both for the highs and the lows, the couch surfing and the house sitting, the doubts, but also the moments of certainty when you know you need to step, even when you can't see the whole staircase. You have built a strong foundation. As you take that next step now, you are not alone. Linfield, class of 2013, the rest is up to you. Congratulations and all the best.